service. We have another special service this morning, special in a multitude of ways. Special first and foremost because it's Shabbat. Special because we're also hybrid and streaming this service. So to those of you who are on Zoom, if you don't wish to be identified in the wider public space, then by all means turn your cameras off. But I hope that everyone will still feel able to participate in the service. So we start with a Shabbat morning that is in and of itself a special occasion, and we can celebrate that. And the fact that it's bright outside and feeling warm and positively mid-spring-like is also helpful. That's number one. Well, number one and number two even. Next, it's special because it's a great pleasure and privilege for me to be able to welcome Rabbi Tabick to our building for the first time and to our community. And part of the reason that that is special is that we are also welcoming some of the members who have transferred across from West Central Liberal Synagogue, the Phillipses, Blasey, Roses, and are here, and there are other families who I don't think will be joining us. Jackie and I suspect that might have a football reason associated with it. But it's also beautifully timed in that some of you may have been aware that in the last few days, particularly women colleagues of ours, and I don't know, Jackie, if you posted yourself, but lots of people were posting photos of their own Benot Mitzvah from whatever time, because just a couple of days ago marked the centenary of the first known Bat Mitzvah celebration. Judith Kaplan, the daughter of Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan, in 1922, and so it is the centenary of that, which was a major step forward in equality, which also led probably quite directly to the fact that in the early 1970s, first in America, Rabbi Sally Present was the first woman to be ordained by a seminary as a rabbi. And that was followed just 3 years later by the ordination of the first woman rabbi in Europe, or outside North America, is possibly, again, ordained by seminary, which was Rabbi Tabick. So it's an extra pleasure to be welcoming you this Shabbat itself. So we'll be marking all of those things in the service. And finally, it's a special service because we have a number of people who are entering the building for the first time or re-entering the building following the years where the pandemic has been affecting attendance and meaning the building has had to be closed. So it feels like we've got a double blessing that we need to say at this moment. One is an incomplete blessing, and I'm going to suggest we say it, but we say it with the rider. Much though we would love to think the pandemic is over, it isn't. Quite where it's going to go, I don't have a crystal ball good enough to tell me. But for now, we can at least say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam gomel chasadim tovim. Thank you who has brought us through the worst waves, we hope they will prove to be the worst waves of the pandemic, and allowed us to return to our community. And that then follows with a prayer for a special occasion, which this is. So if you want to join with me on Zoom or in person, we'll say the Shehecheyanu together, and then we'll make a start in our service. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Shehecheyanu v'kiyimanu v'hineyanu lazman hazeh. And so welcome to everyone who is celebrating a first time, whatever that first time might be. We're going to share in the reading of the fourth Shabbat morning service, which begins on page 122, page 122. And there, and throughout the service, when we ask people to rise, to stand, please feel free to rise physically if you wish to, whether you're in person here or on Zoom, or rise in spirit if that would feel a more appropriate rising for you, so that you, if you like, bring yourself to attention. So we will rise as we commence our service. Elohim b'rov chesdecha, aneni be'emet tishecha. May our prayers this morning be acceptable to you, eternal God. In your great kindness, answer us with your saving truth. Please be seated. Let's all read together this opening passage that concludes with a blessing that feels especially pertinent today. Eternal God, we come before you surrounded by members of our community. With them we share our happiness and it becomes greater. Our troubles and they become smaller. May we never reach the mean to give, nor too proud to receive. For giving and receiving is not without limit. And beginning to understand the meaning of our life. Let us not separate ourselves from the true faith of our community. The experience and wisdom of old people, the hopes of the young, and the examples of care and courage which sustain us. Give us an open mind and a generous heart to welcome those who need us and to admit your presence into our daily life. We praise you, eternal God, sovereign of the universe, for the strength that comes to us through our community. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Oseh Yisrael b'Torah. La'olam Yehei Adam Yirei Shamayim B'Seiter U'Vagalui U'Modeh Al Ha'emet V'Doveh Emet Bilvavo. We should revere God in all that we do, privately as well as publicly, acknowledge the truth and speak it in our hearts. I'm going to move over the page to page 124, page 124. There we come to the second section of our service, the Pesukei de Zimra, and we read the opening passage together, after which I'd like to invite Susie Barnett, when we get to it, to read the passage, the piyut, that is at the top of page 125. And Susie, of course, is on Zoom. We read together. Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam baruch hu. Eloheinu melech ha'olam, ha'mehulah b'fi amo, meshubach u'foah b'lshon chasidav v'avadav, b'shvachot u'v'zmirot, נגדל לך ונמליך לך מלכנו יגיד אי העולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, מלך לעולם ותשבחות. We praise you, sovereign God, to whom all praise is due.
At dawn and dusk, I seek you, reach out and look to you. With soul athirst, I yearn for you. I am a beggar at your door. The galaxies cannot contain you, yet you dwell in my inmost being. I hold your glory in my heart. My love for you exceeds my speech, so I will praise your name, Eternal One, as long as your breath of life remains within me. Praise be the Eternal One forever.
Amen. Praise be the eternal God, the God of Israel, who does wonderful things. Let God's glorious name be praised forever, and let the whole earth be filled with God's glory. Amen. Amen. Nishmat kol chai, tevarech et shilcha. Going to continue at the halfway down on page 127, on page 127. We read together. For so it is written, all my earth shall say, who is like you, eternal Lord? Therefore we extol you and proclaim your glory, and praise your holy name. As it is said, praise the Eternal One of my soul. Let all that is within me praise God's holy name. Adonai malakei lavesh, lavesh Adonai hospitaza aftikon tevel baltimot. Nachon kisachar me'at me'olam v'ata naseu naharot Adonai naseu naharot kolam yiseu naharot dakyam mikolot Rabim, Adirim, Mishpreyam, Adir Amarom Adonai. Eidotecha nemnu me'od, Beveitecha nalakodesh, Adonai leoret yamim, Leore Amen. Please rise. Yishtabach Shimcha Eloheinu Ha'el HaMelech HaGadol VaHaKadosh B'Shamayim V'Haaretz Hilchon Eloheinu Shir U'Shmata Ha'el V'Zimra Toda Towards the foot of page 135, page 135. Baruch turn the page and we join in singing about the joy of creation. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Shalom, shalom, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Shalom, shalom, we conclude this with the Hatimah for the prayer, the closing line. Baruch atah Adonai, Yotzei ha'orot. We praise you, O God, Creator of life. As we come to the relationship between God and Israel, I wonder if I could come to Viv Martin, who's in our Zoom congregation, to lead us through this prayer, please.
Great is your love for us, eternal God, and abundant your compassion. Our ancestors trusted in you, and you taught them the laws of life. So be gracious to us and teach us. Incline our hearts to hear your words, to know and understand, to learn and teach, and with love to uphold the truths of your Torah. Enlighten us with your teaching, make us faithful to your commandments, and thank you, wholehearted in the love and awe of your name. For in love you summon us to serve you and proclaim your unity. We praise you, O God. In love you have called your people Israel to serve you. Baruch atah Adonai, abocher be'amo, Israel v'ahava.
And we rise as we open the ark. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Eternal One is our God, the Eternal God is one. Shema Yisrael,
Not good on here.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך. והיו הדברים האלה ואנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך ושירת לבבך ודיברת בם ושמעתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשרפך ובקומך ובשרתם לעמוד על ידיך והיו תותבות בעיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך You shall love the Eternal One your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Let these words which I command you this day always be in your heart. Teach them diligently to your children. Speak of them in your home and on your way. When you lie down and when you rise up, bind them to sign on your hand. Let them be like frontlets between your eyes. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and upon your doors. Lema Tizkaru Vasitem et ha-mitzvotai V'tem Kedoshim Eloheihem Ani Adonai Eloheihem Asher hoseti etem be'eretz Mitzrayim Li'ot lachem le'Elohim Ani Adonai Eloheihem. Do please be seated. Emet v'yatziv v'yashar v'kayam v'tov v'yafer hadavar hazeh aleinu le'olam va'ed. Emet sha'ata hu Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu Malkeinu melech avoteinu Yotzreinu tzur yeshuateinu Odeinu umatzilenu me'olam hu shemecha Ein Elohim zulatecha. Emet atahu rishon v'atahu umibaladecha ilanu Moshiach. Mimitzrayim ga'altanu Adonai Eloheinu umibeit avadim v'nitam. Moshe u'Miriam u'bnei Israel lecha anu shira b'simcha rabah v'amru chulam Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha betorah kodesh, norah tehilot u'sefer. Shirach Rasha Shivku Geulim Shimcha Auspat Hayah. Yachad Kulam Hodu Behimliku Va'amru. Adonai Ilah Le'olam Va'ed. Zu Yisrael Kumat Yisrael Lo'einu Adonai Se'os Shemot Kadosh Yisrael Baruch Adonai God Israel God Israel Amen.
Page 140. במקום כמכנו טובים, ותמוך עלינו, כי אנחנו לך, ימוך Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh. As you wish, sit down. We inspired our sisters to have this day for yourselves. When the prophets come in, we pause to contemplate our life. We learn anew that we do not live by bread alone, but also by the spiritual nourishment we receive when we open ourselves to your influence. We thank you for this Sabbath day and for the opportunity it offers to enhance the quality of our lives. And thank you for its joy and richness. Our worship help us to take into our hearts and consecrate all our days by devotion to what Son of God, gracious to your people Israel, and in your love accept their praise. May our worship now and always be acceptable in your sight. We praise you, O God, and worship. We give thanks that you are God, as you were the God of our ancestors. You are the rock of our life, the power that shields us in every age. We thank and praise you for our lives, which are in your hand, for our souls, which are in your keeping, for the signs of your presence we encounter every day, and for your wondrous gifts at all times, morning, noon, and night. We praise you, God, source of goodness, to whom our thanks are due. See Chain Chesed Barachamim, Aleinu Al Israel, Amen. Barachnu Avinu Lanu Kedachad Ba'or Panecha. Ki Ba'or Panecha Natata Lanu Adonai Eloheinu. Torah Chayim Ba'ahavat Chesed Utzedakah Barachamim B'chayim B'shalom. V'tov be'enecha levarech et amcha Yisrael ve'et kol ha'amim v'chol eit v'shem Baruch atah Adonai Osei Thank you for putting up with the different tunes.
We're really enjoying it.
So we move now to our Seder Kriyat HaTorah, the service for the reading of the Torah, which is on page 481. And as we come to this point in the service, the newer members and entrance into the synagogue, Jacobi up to do Hagban Galila for us. So on page 4. Ein kamocha ve'elohim Adonai ve'kamasecha Rabbi ve'shomtecha b'chol tovado Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Eternal One is our God, the Eternal God is one. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Gadol Shemo. Yalu Launai Iti, Unaroma Ma Shemo Yahdav. Let us magnify the Eternal One. Together let us exalt God's name. Bless Adonai, Achidula, Baha'imura, Baha'imper, and Baha'aneta, Just a moment, we'll bring the scroll forward. So do please be seated.
You can leave the window open, I don't mind. Sorry? I go on.
So, we come to the reading of the Torah continues from last week's portion that we read. It has partly a focus on the sabbatical year, and it also has a focus on a word that in particular when we were reading those passages just after the Shema. And we conclude there, Baruch atah Adonai Ge'al Yisrael, Redeemer of Israel. God is the Redeemer of Israel. And here we come across different roles for different people to redeem. We have an essential concept. Essential concept is that land should remain in the tribes and the families to which it was designated. In many ways, to ensure that land could not accumulate to select individuals who happened to have more land more fortune in any sense of the word fortune. So they could not. And it talks about how it would return at the latest in every Jubilee year. And doubts as to how much this may have actually happened in practicality, the aspiration of what might have been called a few decades ago a redistribution of wealth, something on, I think, even in 2022. So we're reading from Leviticus chapter 25. We're picking up verse 25. We're going to give you the page numbers for those who have Mashim and the assurance. It will be available on screen for those who are on Zoom as well. So if you have the blue and white covered Hertz Chumash, then you want page 534, page 534. Okay, Sam? You have the dark blue covered Clout Chumash, you're on page 852. And if you have the green covered Women's Commentary, you should be on page 753. Does that sound right, Sharon? Page 753. And does anyone have a smaller Tanakh? Right, page for. So it's a great pleasure to say this morning, Yom Ben Yitzchak, the Kriyat Torah, come forward, Stuart. New and very welcome members for this morning's reading of the Torah. And for those of you who are new to the building, this is the healthy noise of the Hader children, probably on a break or between sessions at the moment. The building has not yet collapsed under the weight of their noise, and I don't think it will today either. But Stuart, with that, please.
אשר בחרנו מתוך העמים, ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני, נותן התורה. Amen.
So we'll read the passage in the Hebrew first, and then I'll fight with Stuart as to who's going to read the English. Okay? We'll argue it out. כי ימות אחיך ומחה מאחוזתו ובא גואלו הקרוב אליו וגאל את ממך אחיו ואיש כי לא יהיה לו גואל והשיגה ידו ומצא כדי גאולתו וחישב את שני ממחרו והשיג את העודף לאיש אשר מכר לו ושב לאחוזתו ואם לא מצא ידו די השיב לו והיה ממחרו ביד הקונה אותו עד שנת היובל ויצא ביובל ושב לאחוזתו ואיש כי ימחה בית מושב עיר חומה והייתה גאלתו עד תום שנת ממחרו Yamim Yihye Geulato. Ve'im lo yig'al ad melot lo shana tamima. V'kam habayit asher ba'ir asher lo choma. Litz mitut l'koneh oto l'dorotav lo yetze bayovel. Vate hachatzerim asher ein lahem choma saviv al hasadeh haaretz yechashev geula tihyeh lo uvayovel yetze. Va'arei halvi'im Batei irei achuzatam Geula olam tihyeh lalvi'im Va'asher yig'al min halvi'im V'yatsa mancho bayit Va'ir achuzato bayovel ki Veiti lo yimha ki achuzat olam hi lahem.
Peace or property, then the next of kin shall come to redeem what the relative has sold. If the person has no one to redeem it, but then prospers and finds sufficient reason to do so, the years since its sale shall be computed and the difference shall be refunded to the person to whom it was sold, and the property shall be returned. But if there is not sufficient means to recover it, what was sold shall remain with the purchaser until the year of Jubilee. In the Jubilee it shall be released, and the property shall be returned. If anyone sells a dwelling house in a walled city, it may be redeemed until a year has elapsed since its sale. The right of redemption shall be for 1 year. If it is not redeemed before a full year has elapsed, a house that is in a walled city shall pass in perpetuity to the purchaser throughout the generations. It shall not be released in the Jubilee. But houses in villages that have no walls around them shall be classed as open country. They may be redeemed, and they shall be released in the Jubilee. As for the cities of the Levites shall forever have the right of redemption of the houses of the cities belonging to them. Such property as may be redeemed from the Levites, houses sold in a city belonging to them, shall be released in the Jubilee, because the houses in the cities of the Levites are their possessions among the people of Israel. But the open land around the city may not be sold, for that is their possession for all the time. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah Tavik, v'chayei olam natan b'sofenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. Amen.
So we stand as the Torah scroll will be raised, and then after we've sung together in a moment, we'll be coming across to Judy Berkowitz, who will read the Haftarah for us this morning. Baruch Shem Torah Le'amo Yisrael B'Yushato. Do please be seated, and Judy is going to read our Haftarah from the book of Jeremiah.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher banavim tov. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher banavim tovim, v'ratzah b'rechem hane'emarim b'emet. Baruch atah Adonai, haboher b'Torah u'v'Moshe avdo v'Yisrael amo u'v'ne'eh hamet v'tzedek. Jeremiah said, the word of the Eternal One came to me. Hanamel, son of your uncle Shalom, is going to come to you and say, buy my field that is at Anathos, for the right of redemption by purchase is yours. Then my cousin Hanamel came to me in the court of the guard, in accordance with the word of the Eternal One, and said to me, buy my field that is at Anathos in the land of Benjamin, for the right of possession and redemption is yours. Buy it for yourself. Then I knew that this was the word of the Eternal One. And I bought the field at Anathos from my cousin Hanamel and weighed out the money to him, 17 shekels of silver. I signed the deed, sealed it, got witnesses, and weighed the money on scales. Then I took the sealed deed of purchase containing the terms and conditions and the open copy. And I gave the deed of purchase to Baruch, son of Neriah, son of Maaseiah, in the presence of my cousin Hanamel, in the presence of the witnesses who signed the deed of purchase, and in the presence of all Judanians who were sitting in the court of the guard. In their presence I charged Baruch, saying, thus says the Eternal One of hosts, the God of Israel, take these deeds, both the sealed deed of purchase and this open deed, and put them in an earthenware jar, in order that they may last for a long time. For thus says the Eternal One of hosts, the God of Israel, houses and fields and vineyards shall again be bought in this land. After I had given the deed of purchase to Baruch, son of Neriah, I prayed to the Eternal One, saying, Eternal One, Eternal God, it is you who made the heavens and the earth by your great power and by your outstretched arm. Nothing is too hard for you. You show steadfast love to the 1,000th generation, but repay the guilt of parents into the laps of the children after them. O great and mighty God, whose name is the Eternal One of hosts, great in counsel and mighty indeed, whose eyes are open to all the ways of mortals, rewarding all according to their ways and according to the fruit of their doings. You showed signs and wonders in the land of Egypt, and to this day in Israel, and among all humankind, and have made yourself a name that continues to this very day. You brought your people Israel out of the land of Egypt, with signs and wonders, with a strong hand and outstretched arm, and with great terror. And you gave them this land, which you swore to their ancestors to give them, a land flowing with milk and honey. And they entered and took possession of it, but they did not obey your voice or follow your law of all you commanded them to do. They did nothing. Therefore, you have made all these disasters come upon them. See, the siege ramps have been cast up against the city to take it, and the city faced with sword, famine, and pestilence has been given to the hands of the Chaldeans who are fighting against it. What you spoke has happened, as you yourself can see. Yet you, O eternal God, have said to me, buy the field for money and get witnesses, though the city has been given into the hands of the Chaldeans. The word of the Eternal One came to Jeremiah. See, I am the Eternal One, the God of all flesh. Is anything too hard for me? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam tzur kol halomim tzadek b'kol hadorot ha'el ha'ne'emim ha'omer ba'osei ha'medaber v'mekayam shekol divrei emet v'tzedek. Al ha'torah ba'al ha'avadah ba'al ha'navaim ba'al yom ha'shabbat ha'sei שנתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו, לקדושה, למנוחה, לכבוד ולהתפארות על הכל, אדוני אלוהינו, אנחנו מודים לך, ומברכים אותך יתברך שמי בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת.
Shkach, Judy, and thank you very much. And so we continue 84. The first of our three prayers is going to be read here by Lasse, the second by Anna, the third we'd like to come across Rachel as you're doing all the liturgy sharing if you have one the state of Israel, and then we will also have a prayer for Ukraine which Helen is going to read, and to complete the 5 prayers we'll have the prayer for the new month as well. We've got a long way there.
Eternal God, who created the universe, we ask you blessing for our sovereign Lady Queen Elizabeth and all the royal family, for those who govern our country and all who influence the quality of its national life. May be conscious of their responsibility and teach them to exercise in accordance with your will. Of humanity.
Amen. Amen.
Eternal Father, as you blessed our ancestors in generations past, bless now this congregation, its leaders and its members, and all who enter the synagogue to meet, to study, and to pray. Comfort the sorrowing hearts among us, and heal those in anxiety or pain.
At this point, having just mentioned all those in anxiety and pain, on the time when we have a streaming service, we don't mention any names in particular, but we do pause to remember and pray for healing for those who are going through times of illness. I know, Judy, you read the Haftarah for us, but your plans this weekend have been disrupted by the fact that you're COVID positive tested, and so you couldn't go down and join your daughter, unfortunately. So we will be wishing you well, and those other people as well. So, Yehi ratzon milfanecha Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu shetishlach meheira refuah shlema, refuat hanefesh, refuat haguf, l'chol ha'anashim v'hanashim asher b'kehila hazot, b'toch sha'ah ha'cholim. May it be your will, eternal one, our God and God of our ancestors, speedily to grant a perfect healing of body and of mind to all those who are members of this community or acquaintances or friends of and friends, amongst all those who are sick. Baruch atah Rofei HaKolim. We praise you, O God, the source of healing.
May we all find companionship, renewal of purpose, a deeper understanding of our heritage, and a sense of your abiding presence. Bless congregations of the house of Israel throughout the world. Let those who live under oppressive rules
And Rachel.
Eternal God, our rock and redeemer, grant blessing to the state of Israel, created to fulfill an age-old dream and to be a haven for the oppressed. Inspire its leaders and citizens with faithfulness to the aims of its founders, to develop the land for the benefit of all of its inhabitants, and to implement the prophetic ideas of liberty and justice. May they live in harmony with one another and in peace with their neighbours, and cause to come true once more the ancient vision that out of Zion shall go forth Torah and the word of God from Jerusalem.
Prayer for Ukraine, written by Rabbi Eternal One, rock of our existence, the source and sustainer of life. As President Putin wages war on Ukraine and the forces of autocracy wreak havoc and attempt to instill terror and fear in every heart, we call on Ukraine in their collective will to muster and shield strength, strengthened by the knowledge that put everything necessary to support their effort. People everywhere, like ourselves, horror and feel helpless and hopeless in the face of overwhelming events beyond our control. We ask you to enable us. We are not powerless to help, but our deeds, however small, matter. And above we have the obligation to hope values of peace and freedom, equality and justice. May this be our will, and let us say,
Amen. Thank you. Eternal One, our God and God of our ancestors, may the new month be for us a time of renewal. Grant to each one of us a long life of peace, welfare, and blessing, life of prosperity, a life guided by conscience, self-reproach or shame, a life exalted by love, Torah, and reverence for the divine, a life in which the longings of our hearts may be fulfilled for good. Rosh Chodesh Nisan Yiyeh Bayom Shabbat. The new month of this month will begin next Shabbat. And Rabbi Jackie is going to pick up from here.
It has always been our custom since the days of my time at West London that you got to tune for the next festival that was going to use that tune. So, of course, it's Adielu. What else? Yakadoshehu Hakadosh Aleinu Yaakov Anu Beit Israel L'chaim U'Shalom L'sason U'L'simcha L'Yeshua U'Milchama.
Omar, Amen. Yahalelu et Shem Adonai ki nisgav shemo levado. Let us praise the Eternal One, whose name alone is exalted. Odor eretz v'shamayim, v'yarem kerem v'halo, On page 488, page 488. God's teaching is perfect,
Reviving the soul.
God's word is unfailing,
Making wise and simple.
God's precepts are right,
Delighting the mind.
God's commandments are clear,
Enlightening the eyes.
God's doctrine is pure,
Enduring forever.
God's guidance is true.
And altogether just.
Behold, a good doctrine has been given you, do not forsake it. It is a tree of life to those who hold it fast, and all who cling to it find happiness. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace.
First of all, a real thank you to my colleague for inviting me today and giving me a chance to see some of my wonderful erstwhile congregants. It's just lovely to see you here taking your place in this lovely community. Thank you so very much for doing that for me. And I apologise for my croaky voice. I had lurgy, but I've had the other lurgy. 2.5 years without a cold. This is 3.5 weeks on and I still haven't got my voice back. But never mind, it will happen. So I apologise for my croak. And I hope that you won't be surprised that rabbis sometimes have, shall we call them, vigorous discussions. One such happened a few weeks ago, just as war broke out, between a group of my colleagues who work in Eastern and Central Europe. One of them had written a prayer for peace and was welcomed warmly by all except for one. This person was, you could hear his angerness, his bitterness over the WhatsApp texts. What, he yelled on this text, is the point of prayer? God doesn't listen. God never listens. Think of the Holocaust. We shouldn't spend our time, wasting our time, composing a prayer. We need to make a statement condemning Putin for his evil acts. And I understand his angst, his family and friends in Ukraine. But my feeling is that such a statement by a small group of rabbis would probably have been even much less effective than a prayer. Why? Well, I want to point to you in the direction of the Haftarah we read today. The Haftarah is timed in spring, around this time of the year in fact, in the year 586 before the Common Era. The Babylonian army was besieging Jerusalem. It was dire. And it's terrible that the pictures, the empathy we can have with them in Jerusalem at that time, because now we have stories like that from Ukraine. And Jeremiah was stuck in prison because he'd opposed his government's policy of allying with Egypt against Babylon, breaking an earlier agreement he had made with the Babylonian monarch. And amid all this destruction and the obvious pending fall of the city, which with hindsight we also know would include the burning down of the temple and the forced exile of many of the people, one of Jeremiah's cousins came to visit and asked him to buy a piece of family property. Really? Catastrophe happening all around them, and Jeremiah should be busy buying a field? But Jeremiah understood the symbolic importance of the act, a declaration of hope for the future. Unfortunately, I think we can clearly empathize with Jeremiah's anger and depression that he had displayed thus far. We too have been through and are still in such difficult times. The pandemic, and I feel sure that COVID was really the final devastating blow that led to the demise of our beloved West Central. And now, scenes of war we never thought we would see again in Europe. Millions of refugees streaming across the land. So many killed, wounded, and the very land of Ukraine being laid to waste. So far, we look from afar in horror, but I'm sure I'm not the only one here who fears for the future of our children and grandchildren, and who really fears in terror that World War III should break out. Meanwhile, we're all affected by the political and economic turmoil, the growth of poverty on a terrible scale in this country and abroad, the disparity of wealth, which the Torah reading, of course, as Rabbi Jacobi explained, in the Torah, this is not something, it was something we should be avoiding in our lives. But in our society, this disparity of wealth between the so very rich and the poor, and the hatred and the divisiveness in our society, the corruption we see, and the wish of so many in power who seem to be prepared to use any means, however violent or corrupt, to stay in power. So yes, we can empathize with Jeremiah's repeated calls in the earlier chapters of Jeremiah against the evil of his society. It's a challenge to us, though, to hang on to that other lesson that he showed us in today's reading, the lesson he learnt and was prepared to accept even as his situation grew so dire, to somehow hold on to hope. And that for me is where prayer comes in. I don't expect God, Exodus style, to intervene directly in this dreadful situation we're finding ourselves. But prayer reminds me of several things. It reminds me that despite difficulties and challenges that may be present in our own personal lives, we have to show gratitude, be able to see, feel gratitude for the beauties that surround us too. And we have to understand, and I think prayer helps this, how insignificant we really are. You know, in the world, what are we? And yet, prayer reminds us how powerful we are. We can be powerful as partners with God in the work of creation. So prayer can help us, I think, put our worries in perspective and hopefully drive us to act, to do whatever we can. It may be small things, writing those statements, writing those endless letters to our MPs that I'm sure they never read. It might be giving as much tzedakah as we can, or bigger things that so many have been able to undertake, welcoming refugees into their homes, going to the borders, helping those who arrive with nothing, which is what my colleagues, of course, in the Central and Eastern European areas are now doing. Fear is a defensive reflex. Fear can make us close in on ourselves and on our own needs, which are important. I'm not going to deny that. We have to survive. Otherwise, who can we help anyway? But prayer, with the reminder that we are part of a bigger world and of a God of creation of life and hope that brings of a better future, can help widen our perceptions of how we can help others. In some Jewish communities, in many Jewish communities around the world, today on this Shabbat, they'll be reading an extra piece in Torah. It's a very strange piece from the book of Numbers, chapter 19. But it's so strange, even King Solomon said he couldn't understand it. It tells of a piece of how the ashes of a red heifer, of a red cow, can be used to make people ritually pure, while the people who prepare the ashes and collect those ashes by the same ashes are made ritually impure. It sounds crazy, and it is. And it probably is read at this time of the year to remind ourselves to get ritually and spiritually pure for Pesach. 3 weeks to go. That's what we heard this morning. Rosh Chodesh Nisan, next Shabbat. But the passage also reminds us of how little we can understand God. In mystical terms, God is called the Ein Sof, God beyond us all. And this text reminds us not to be so proud as to think we can second guess God, or how God may act or not act in this world, or that we can ever fully understand what God does. Richard Dawkins, of course, famously reduced God to a concept that he could fully understand and then rejected that God. Well, a God that I could fully understand, I think I'd probably reject as well. So is the answer to reject prayer? To avoid religious groups and actions? To me, that's not the answer, and in time, when hopefully things get better, I might respond to that colleague who wanted the statement rather than prayer. I must ask, why does one exclude the other? I might respond to him and remind him how I feel that prayer is a spur to hope. Prayer can be a spur to action. As we now start in our main preparation for Pesach, the time of our freedom, of our salvation from tyranny, so we must redouble our efforts of chesed, gimulut chasedim, of kindness and good acts, to do what we can to help those suffering at this moment from what many of them have called hell on earth. And that's what the pictures look like. That is our task. Jeremiah calls us to have a commitment to work for a better future.
Shabbat. Thank you, Rabbi. We're going to come now to brief concluding prayers. So a short paragraph on page 520, an even shorter paragraph on page 521, and then we'll move towards the Kaddish. So if you would please rise. Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon ha'kol, la'teit kedula liyotzeh b'reishit, asher sam chelkeinu li'achei et shemo, v'goraleinu la'hamlich malchuto, v'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim, lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu. At the foot of page 521, has been said, the eternal God shall rule over all the earth. On that day the eternal God shall be one and known to be one. Vayom hanu yeh echad u'shemo echad paragraph on page 522, deliberately in the light of what Rabbi Jackie said, it's tempting for us to feel that the opening phrase of this paragraph is no longer true. But I think we have to remember that the long arc of history says this is perhaps a blip, and that the sentiment that George Eliot wrote in Middlemarch remains true now. The growing good of the world so ill with you and me as they might be. It's hard with the number who lived faithfully a hidden life, and who rest visited too. Even when they are gone, parted are with us. They inspire us to live as in their higher moments they themselves sought to live. We remember them now, and on this we recall mother of Councillor Judith Garfield, grandmother of our member Joshua Garfield, who died last Sunday and whose funeral took place on Tuesday. We also join with our community and other communities around the country and the world of progressive Judaism in remembering a former rabbi of this congregation whose second yahrzeit falls in the next day or two, Rabbi Neil Kraft. We also remember Ron Kennard. And Gold, who is remembered who is remembering someone either in the sanctuary on the Zoom. No one here. Is there anyone mentioning someone on Zoom? Don't think so. We'll continue to carry the memory of those that we have loved in our hearts, and with continual blessing. Zichronam livracha. Yikadal v'yikadal v'yikadal v'al kutei v'yamlik ma'kutei v'chai echon v'yoleh kol beit Yisrael v'agal Rabbi la'olam la'omei omaya Yitvarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ah v'yitram v'yitnaseh V'yitadar v'yitalei v'yitalal shnei kudusha b'richu Le'ela min kol mirchata v'shirata V'yiram Ama v'yiru Amen. V'yiru Amen. Oseh shalom v'roma Uyaseh shalom Aleinu Kol Yisrael Amen. Please be seated. I'm going to ask our Vice Chair of Council, Stuart Spivak, to make announcements on including benedictions in a sung form on page 529, and then we can move to make Kiddush together.
Thanks, thank you. Thanks everybody. Shabbat shall be trying to be back here. Very nice. Before I was rudely interrupted by Cody. Want to welcome our new members from West Central. We've been here book on all the many media outlets that we are, and thanks to the technical wizards who host the meeting and film the meeting and thought up all this wonderful system, and we're still improving on. Thanks to them all, it's wonderful. So we can all gather together in all our different forms. And thanks, Rabbi Richard and Rabbi Jackie for. And then Rabbi Jackie, I may say, if that is your voice with a cold, it's beautiful, thank you. Tomorrow there is a joint Swizzers and ELELS hosted singing for ELELS. It's Miracle Singers and they sing very range music. I'm not sure actually I'm advertising it. I don't know if tickets are still there or not.
There are tickets available on the door tomorrow.
Okay, right, so that's our ELELS for chat. Of the sort and session with Rabbi Richard hosting, please try and come, of course, you know, it's so important to get the opinions of Jews out into the community generally, so please try and attend that. Thursday evening at 7 o'clock is the new time for puzzles afternoon, and if you and our communal savings back this year, first time after 2 years, it'd be at the Clortikva School, and evening of Saturday, the 16th of April. Saturday, the 16th of April. So if you're interested, please look at the update, because you can list application to be. The numbers will be limited, obviously for COVID reasons, but obviously we do our best to maximise numbers. Well, Jackie, I'd like you to present you with this something in it. The 100th of the first B'nai Mitzvah at West Central, a fantastic achievement. Thank you also. I'll bring it down. Shalom everyone, and take care. Thank you. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you, Stuart. Just to explain, we felt that would be appropriate, and perhaps you will. Just to conclude our service, we ask God to grant strength to all peoples and bless peoples with peace. Adonai, Shabbat Shalom to everyone. Kiddush wine and grape juice will be coming out to those who are in the sanctuary. I'm hoping those who are on Zoom will perhaps find something with which they can make Kiddush as well. And the Shabbat morning Kiddush is on page 566. Page 566. So So while that's coming out, I'm going to start so that we can speed along, because those who have children in the Cheder, they'll be waiting for you rather than you waiting for them. But hopefully, Sharon, which have you got? Sharon's got the grape juice. Kiddush wine will be coming for those who prefer Kiddush wine. And we're going to begin. We're going to begin on page 566. Zachor in Shabbat the Kadsho. Remember the Sabbath day is holy. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat la'asot et HaShabbat l'torotam b'ritolam b'nei Yisrael oti Asadonai et Hashem Shabbat the Shehu, therefore the Eternal One blessed the Sabbath day. And our final formality is to join together and to sing Baruch Atah Amotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. At this point we say farewell to those who are streaming. We'll be joining us with Shabbat Shalom.